dyeing seems a lot more interesting to me.
Welcome on Lake Geneva. It's just in my neighborhood, so why not take a boat ride? Yeah, Lake Geneva, a very deep lake, and there's still some unsolved mysteries down below my feet that, kind of spooky, you know?
Okay, enough of these fun rides. Let's go straight to the studio and see what happened there. In order to do some block dyeing, we'll need a dyeing block. Who would have thought? Any piece of wood wrapped in dense fabric such as denim and stapled or nailed to it will do. A softer version of a dyeing block can be done with a soft t-shirt fabric maintained with a rubber band over a piece of packaging foam or styrofoam. Well, it isn't rocket science, and there's other options to improvise a dyeing block. The best effect of block dyeing is on textured leather. There's a few very simple techniques to give a nice texture to your leather, like press and roll a threaded rod onto it, or scratch it with a fork, or hammering it. With a bit of imagination and observation, you may come up with other texturing ideas like shown here with a very rough sandpaper. The link here below will give you some more details about texturing leather. Let's start with the threaded rod texture in some light blue. Just 1 or 2 little drops. Blue is very powerful. This is why I'm going to thin it down in lots of alcohol. Just carefully take very, very little and mix it up little by little until I just got the hue I want, some sort of a transparent inky blue, and from there I just fill my piece in, I just paint it all over. Then the most important part is give it time to dry so it lightens up. Meanwhile, we can prepare for the next step, that is, we put our color away and take Grandma's favorite china, of course, some black pro dye. Just a few drops should do. We don't want to be wasteful with our dye stuff, do we? Next, we'll need some newspaper, our dye block, the one with denim, and I just apply some dye onto that block. It doesn't matter if the full block is full of dye, just a good part will do. We want our block to be nearly dry, so we remove the excess dye on our block on some newspaper so that we can apply it very, very lightly and gently, and we don't have too much dye stuff that may just like seep into the recesses of your texture. We best picture our texture as peaks and valleys. Down in the valleys the first light color, and then on top on the peaks the second darker color. Never mind the color combinations, that's your choice. Just remember, light and then dark on top. The next texture is the one I did with the fork. First I apply a good layer of yellow straight out of the can. Then a few drops of British tan to do the tops. Now this time the applicator is going to be the thread dauber, actually a dauber done with our cotton t-shirt. Again, apply lightly, dab out the excess on a newspaper until it's almost dry, and then you work in the top color gently in circular motions until you reached the desired result. On the hammer texture, I apply some orange base color. It is a mix of yellow and strongly diluted red. A few drops of oxblood alcohol dye will be my top layer. The cork covered with a piece of cotton t-shirt is the applicator I used this time. Let the color soak into the cotton, dab it off on the newspaper until it's nearly dry, and repeat the exercise I previously showed by rubbing the surface gently until desired contrast is reached. Now, there, isn't that nice? Our next trick is about the different hardness of our blocks. Since there exists the rule that there is no rule in art, let us do the whole block dyeing process just the other way around. I start with a darker top layer, some dark brown, using my chair leg previously wrapped with some denim. Barely managed to get some dye onto the very top of my texture. Then I use a softer block made out of a piece of packaging foam and a thick layer of denim. Since the applicator is softer, it should penetrate a bit deeper. Let's try some of that oxblots we still have left. Again, put some dye on, dab it onto the newspaper, apply it gently in circular motions. Well, it looks as if we got a bit deeper into the texture, dragging some of the dark top layer along, making a nice transition. For the sandpaper texture, I'll try something more artistic with a blend going from yellow to red. Using my packaging foam block that still has some residue from previously used ox blood, I'll get it some darker brown, and well, by now we should know the procedure. Talk about a fancy visual effect. Now, of course, you're the artist, so it's up to you to choose your color combinations, try out and experiment, because there's so many options. I'm starting here with some yellow and red alcohol dye. Beginning with the lightest color, that is yellow, just choose my little sunburst so that I want the color in. Now I add a little touch of red, just to make it slightly orange, and off we go, another zone. Then add some more and more red to it. Now I got my block, I just wet it with some alcohol, there's still enough pigment left in it. Dab it off on the newspaper, of course, and then we brush it in as we've seen before. It's that finishing touch that makes the whole difference, doesn't it? Next one, again, a few dabs of colors. This time we use masking tape. We cover up the zones we don't want to blacken in. Apply your block dyeing and then remove the tape. There we go. Acrylics are more color intensive, hence perfectly suited for this kind of job. An extra time saver, no need to be really careful to apply our paint. It will be cleaned up by the block dyeing later on. The thing I really appreciate with water-based colors is the ease of the brush cleaning. You just swill it around in the water, dab it off, and you're ready to go with the next color. We know by now that alcohol dyes don't cover up, so can we use both? Well, yes, of course. So here, I'll just go with 2 strips of yellow straight out of the can, alcohol dye. And I'll do the middle with an acrylic. Expect to find a fine nuance between the see-through yellow alcohol dye and the covering acrylic dye once I'm done. Okay, the deep layers are done. Now let's get ready to cover up our little spills and imperfections. Look, I got a previously used cork. There's still some dye on it. So let's just put some solvent and see how much pigment I can get out of that. Always remove the excess first. Dab it off on a piece of paper or newspaper and then rub it in gently. We've seen that by now, we should know. The center part needs a little more enhancement, so I'll cover up my red borders with tape and pick out my old block that I've already used. Now, let's check if there's still enough pigment left. Well, apparently not. I'll better add some black to it, I guess. A few drops should do. Make sure to dab the excess color off. Now, good application in the middle, remove the tape. My red borders are intact and my contrast enhanced in the middle. I'm happy with that. Well, let's finish the rest. I'm just too curious to see how the whole thing is going to turn out. I must say, I just surprised myself. I had no idea where this was going. Well, that's a whole bunch of enjoyable episodes where we learn some stuff and ending up being less stupid. But something has been spooking throughout all these episodes, and I wonder what it is.